what it's actually doing is not like defeating an existing search engine. Rather, what it's doing is creating a new market for a new product, a new ecosystem, a new kind of consumer interaction with computers. Perplexity can be a complete replacement to Google already. What we need to do is like give billion people a reason to use our product, even if they want to continue using Google. When really established brands like Microsoft or Google or OpenAI are trying to like clone some of our features, it really means like we're doing something right. Otherwise, like why copy something that's bad? Like you only copy something that's good. So we're very proud of like the fact that these great companies are like taking stuff that we've built and trying to adopt it in their products. For us, it's only search. That's really our ultimate thing.
So Aravind, welcome to Times.
Thank you for having me here. 안녕하세요.
Oh, thank you for joining us. We'll get straight into Perplexity. So you're the co-founder and the CEO of Perplexity. So could you share your journey about like from being a PhD to starting your own business in Silicon Valley? Like what inspired you to found Perplexity?
Yeah, I come from a background where being educated and scholarly and like smart was valued even more than like being rich. The importance of knowledge is very profound in the culture. I'm from India, so I got into one of the premier institutions there, IITs, did my engineering there, and got to Berkeley where I came as a PhD student to do more research in AI. And after being part of the Silicon Valley ecosystem, obviously I was very inspired to start a company too, but I was really thinking like, where can I add a unique value to the world in my own way? And that meant like starting a company that had a deep research grounding and like something to do with my own background, which is in AI, but also a product that would touch the lives of millions of people. That is very hard to identify, all three properties like this. And I studied a lot of companies in the past, and Google is one of the few companies that has these three properties. So I really like did my research on like how Google works and like, read a lot of books about it. Obviously, my financial situation made it necessary for me to like work somewhere and like earn some money before actually taking the risk of doing a company myself. And that's why I went to work at OpenAI for a year and like learn even more about AI and LLMs. And then I could start to see a transition where AI began to be less of a research project and actually started to work in real products used by a lot of people. The first real example of AI actually impacting the lives of people, including me, was this thing where like AI could write code. It could assist a programmer to write code by auto-completing things. And so people were already using that and paying money. It's not even like a free usage. They were paying like $10 a month, and that revenue started to go up. I could hear stories. And so it was very clear that like this technology was going to improve and it could have an actual real monetization aspect to it. And so that's when I decided to leave and like start my own company. Initially, the ambition was not as big as like starting a search engine. It was mainly like, how can we use this generative AI, generative models to rethink a lot of the existing software that we use as is, and like reimagine it, build new experiences. One day we just had this realization that like, why not search over the whole web? Like search engine is the king of all software. It's the one piece of software that's used by like billions of people almost every single day. Like you cannot pass even a single day without asking something on a search engine. All of us have at least that curiosity, right? What to eat, where to go, and like what to do, and like something about a book you're reading, or like something about a TV show. So if you can reimagine the king of all software using the most cutting edge modern AI, you have a potential to like build something with like tremendous impact if you succeed. So that's when I decided to take the risk and like try to do this, and that became Perplexity.
Perplexity is a search engine, like AI search engine. So do you have like specific goals that you want to achieve as a search engine?
Yeah. So Perplexity is best described as an answer engine. I think answer engines never really worked. In fact, in the late 90s, the first iteration of search was like an answer engine called Ask Jeeves. It wouldn't really work because the current AI did not exist like 20 to 25 years back. So that's why like Google converged on this 10 blue link interface, where anytime you ask something, you get like 10 links and like you have to click on a link and like go and read it. Now that actual task of clicking on a bunch of links, reading them, and you having to like figure out which part of it was relevant for your query, essentially, is being done by an AI. So it makes your life easier. You don't have to open 5 tabs. You don't have to ask like 5 different questions. You can just type in like one single question, and the AI is basically doing this job of like asking a bunch of like smaller questions, reading like 10 different web pages and summarizing it well formatted for you and allowing you to converse and ask follow-ups. That is the answer engine experience, the conversational answer engine. What it's actually doing is not like defeating an existing search engine. Rather, what it's doing is creating a new market for a new product, a new ecosystem, a new kind of consumer interaction with computers, where for the first time you can just go to a computer and ask a question, get an answer, and also the sources from where the AI is sourcing the answer from. That way you can trust what it says, you can go and fact check it, verify it, even go and read the source too. So that experience is what we think will be a growing trend. The 10 Blue Link experience was a growing trend from the 2000 to the 2020s. That was the last 2 decades. I think the next 2 decades are about like people going and asking questions, asking AIs to like tell them what to do, like get suggestions and like explore new things, and even ask the AIs to do stuff for them, actions. So I think that's the next 2 decades, and like that's what we want Perplexity to be.
So you talked about the blue links, and I think you were mentioning about Google. So Google still holds about like over 90% of
Right.
the search market.
Right.
So how much of that market share do you think like AI search engines, like you mentioned answer engines, but like in overall can capture from that market share?
Right. So it's less about taking that market share and reducing that 90% to something else. It's more about increasing the market, increasing the usage of the answer engine. So there is completely no reason that one person cannot use both. Like in the sense, you can still continue to use Google. Google can still retain their market share, but there are some things you just cannot do on Google, like asking like what's like the nutritional content of a particular supplement, or like, you know, whether that's good for your body, like what is the best like moisturizer to use. These are the kind of questions that it's very hard to ask Google. So you can come and use our product for that, and both products can grow at the same time. In fact, Google is really not growing. It's already captured almost the entire world. So this is the one that's going to be on an increasing trend. Now, what I would say is that it's not essential to get all the users simultaneously. What's important is like the early adopters are usually the ones who kind of like are, it's a leading trend. Even when Google was really a growing product, people most of the time were using Yahoo. In fact, Yahoo had more traffic than Google until 2010. So for almost like 10 to 15 years of Google's existence, it was not the dominant internet portal. But the thing is that didn't matter, because the early adopters, the tech workers, the engineers, the programmers, you know, like people who were like dabbling with new technology, they were all like adopting Google. And that's exactly what's happening with Perplexity now. Most of the world is still going to be using Google, just like most of the world is still using Yahoo. But the early adopters, the tech people who are like generally interested in computers, software, tools, are all like adopting Perplexity increasingly. And they're not thinking about it as like, oh, I'm going to switch. They're not switch. They can continue to use Google for like navigating around the web. But when they actually have like 4 or 5 questions a day, they can come to us. And that is what we are trying to grow. And like, I think that's the trend is like looking increasingly positive for us.
So are you saying that Perplexity isn't aiming to become an alternative for Google?
It can be if you want it to be, but it doesn't need to be if you don't want it to be. If you are relying on the failure of Google for your company's success, it's a very delicate position to be in, because it's a $1 trillion company. You never want to go head on with a $1 trillion company. Perplexity can be a complete replacement to Google already. And I just use Perplexity all the time for my searches, but I have an incentive. The average person does not. But my point is that like we don't need to succeed at that, because that's like changing the habits of 1 billion people overnight is pretty hard. What we need to do is like give 1 billion people a reason to use our product, even if they want to continue using Google. And the best way to accomplish that is to offer something that Google doesn't offer.
What about the SearchGPT from the OpenAI? Like, could it be the biggest competitor of Perplexity?
I mean, certainly, like since we began, like we always had competition from so many different people. Google themselves, in fact, like they tried to launch this thing called AI Overview, or Search Generative Experience, where sometimes if you type in a question, like a different UI starts streaming the answer. They still have the links at the bottom. So it's a very cluttered UI, but they try to compete with us through that. And then Microsoft Bing Chat has been a competitor, and now OpenAI too through SearchGPT, because ChatGPT like basically makes up things and does not have real-time knowledge and doesn't cite its sources, right? People, when like really established brands like Microsoft or Google or OpenAI are trying to like clone some of our features, it really means like we're doing something right. Like Otherwise, like why copy something that's bad? Like you only copy something that's good. So we're very proud of like the fact that these great companies are like taking stuff that we have built and trying to adopt it in their products. In terms of competition, I would say that, it's all about focus, right? Like for Microsoft or OpenAI, their core focus is like less of Google. Google is a separate example, but let's say for Microsoft and OpenAI, their core focus is somewhere else. So Microsoft's majority of business comes from Azure and like enterprise software. And for OpenAI, the core focus is always on training the next generation of the GPT model. For us, it's only search. That's really our ultimate thing. And I think there's a quote from Bruce Lee, right? Like you can be, you don't need to be scared of the man who practices 10,000 kicks once. Instead, you need to be scared of the man who practices one kick 10,000 times. Like true mastery requires focus. Perplexity is a company only working on this one problem. So we think we have a good shot at succeeding there despite competition. Yeah, I would say that most of the initial features are primarily centered around like stuff that's pretty natively embedded in the OS. Like you're on a Notes app and you're writing something, and you can just like select a piece of text and ask it to edit it in a certain format. Better versions of auto suggest when you're typing in messages, or support like an email support client that can help you draft emails faster. They're doing something that's more natively part of the OS and helps you like do some of these mundane things faster. Our focus is on informational queries where like, we really nail the search component. I think their integration with like their own models or ChatGPT, it's gonna like mostly serve the purpose of like brainstorming. So like, give me some ideas for baby names or like gift ideas for my dad next birthday, sort of things where you don't actually need to like search the web. But if you can't rely on that for say how many grand slams has a tennis player won, or like what's the latest news, or like how's the weather here today in Seoul, or should I take my umbrella with me when I'm going out. These kind of questions are things that require real-time knowledge or accuracy or a combination of both, and you can't rely on Siri for that.
So Perplexity focuses on search. And I think like one of the advantages of Perplexity is providing real-time information, as just mentioned. So as far as I understand, like Perplexity doesn't have its own web crawler or a search engine. So then how does like Perplexity searches up for like those real-time information? Like does it use like other search engines from like Google or Bing?
Yeah, Perplexity has its own web crawler. So that's probably like a less understood component of our stack because we've not like really talked in detail about it. We've been crawling the web since the beginning, and that doesn't mean that we only rely on the web pages that we crawl, because we're still like a very young company, and like it takes like decades of work to actually build a self-sustaining crawling and infrastructure system. And it's not just crawling the web, right? You also have to index it. You also have to rank it. Because when you type in a query, you have to retrieve the top most relevant documents. That requires you to go and crawl like all the important documents on the web, store them in a nice format so that you can retrieve them like really fast, and also rank them so that depending on the query, only the relevant documents are picked. So in search engine terminology, this is typically like three components: crawling, indexing, and ranking. And we've been doing all three in-house for sure. But that doesn't mean like we only rely on what we built. We've also sometimes like rely on data provided by third parties, third-party crawlers, third-party rankers, things like that, and combine all of these things. So just like the same thing we do for language models. We use models that we train in-house and serve. And we also use models that OpenAI and Anthropic and Meta have trained too. And we combine all of them. So we are all about like this orchestration idea. What matters is the whole final end-to-end user experience, because the user actually doesn't care like which crawlers are crawling the web, which models are like being used to summarize an answer. As long as the answer is provided in an instant, really fast, the UX is amazing, the answer is correct and well formatted and things like that. So I think like from the beginning, we've been all about like what matters is the answer, what matters is the speed at which we deliver the answer, and what matters is how accurate it is.
So could you elaborate more about the exact process of like when retrieving the real-time information from the web? Like, yeah. I'm sure it's totally different from when retrieving information, which is not real-time. So right. How does it like differ from it?
Right. So there's an idea in AI called retrieval augmented generation, RAG. Typically in a system like ChatGPT, when you're going and asking a question, you get an answer. that answer is just coming from the knowledge of the AI model itself. That AI model is basically trained by predicting the next word on the entire internet and some human curated data after that and became a chatbot. And it's just answering based on what it's already memorized. So the problem with this is that sometimes the model doesn't have perfect knowledge, so it might make up things. And the model certainly is only trained on data until a certain timestamp, so it doesn't have the real-time information anymore. And that's why like it's unreliable if you're looking for informational queries. It's great if you're just looking for brainstorming ideas, but if it's unreliable otherwise. So what Perplexity does is it says every time a user enters a query, instead of just answering from the AI model, you actually go and pick the relevant documents from the web, from the internet for that query and read those documents and only use those documents and nothing else. Only use the knowledge in those documents to write the answer. So what is the AI doing here? The AI is just doing the mundane task of summarization. It's like read those documents, pick the relevant paragraphs, and look at what the user has asked, and summarize it and format it really well, like bullets, sections, and so on, and just write the answer. So AI is not actually like using its knowledge. So that's why the knowledge is coming from what the humans have already put on the web. There are like pros and cons to this approach. The pros are that it has real-time information. It's using high-quality sources. If you're like making sure that like the sources are up to date, it's fantastic. The cons are that sometimes like people might want to know what the AI thinks and not what other humans think. But we believe that you can only build a product for one purpose. You can't build a product for like multiple purposes. For a query like give me like baby names or like give me birthday gift ideas, hallucination, that is making up things, is a feature, not a bug. You actually want it to make up things. For a query like how's the weather like and what should I wear, hallucination is a bug. You don't want it to make up things. So it's very hard to build one single chatbot that can satisfy both these properties where hallucination is both a feature and a bug. It's very hard to do that. So we decided to focus on only the case where hallucination is a bug. And we try to address that through the RAG idea.
So it seems like it's important to like which documents like should the Perplexity retrieve from the internet. So like and whenever I use Perplexity, I think like the citation is like the most important part of it. So Perplexity always includes like quotes, as you said, in its responses. So I'm sure a lot of content providers would want their like work to be cited by Perplexity. Like, is there an easy way for them to get included into the answer?
Yeah. Well, like most of the times, the sources are based on like, what typically gets a lot of traffic on the web, like what has like low bounce rate and things like that, like those basic stuff that is relevant for any traditional search engine. And then after that, it's all about the content, like relevance of the content in those pages to what the user is asking. Obviously, we have to like make sure that like, we use high quality sources. Otherwise, it's possible that like if the content in the source is incorrect or wrong, the AI model just assumes that it is right and uses it to summarize. And that might end up leading to a low quality answer. So it's not easy, by the way, to solve the problem of like AI figuring out on its own which source is good and bad and like all in real time. It's very hard to do all this. So we try to rely on like many signals on the web to make sure like which web page is used to like write an answer.
So you're using the LLM to judge which...
The LLM comes as a final judge. The initial judge is just the traditional search style retrieval that gives you the like top 20 or 30 documents relevant to a query. LLM is not really used for that.
Then how does it judge like the quality of the content?
Yeah, so the LLM, what it does is all these documents are fed into the prompt of the model, and the model is instructed with this prompt saying, you are supposed to write an unbiased answer in a very journalistic tone, like using all the content from these pages, be completely like as unbiased as possible, make sure that you only pick the relevant things to what the user is asking and nothing else. If you have conflicting sources, if you have two sources saying different things, try to think and reason for a while before giving an answer, or present a perspective where like two sources are saying conflicting things rather than mashing things up. You're obviously giving all these instructions to the model. The challenge is that when presented with so much information, models sometimes like fail to follow instructions religiously. It's sort of similar to humans actually. When you tell someone like do this, do that, do this, and you're giving them a ton of instructions, and then they're supposed to take all that knowledge and go to an exam, and there's like a lot of things that they memorize last minute. They often don't like follow the instructions reliably, right? So that's exactly what happens to AI, and that's how like hallucinations still creep in despite you forcing the model to look at sources. Sometimes it just doesn't obey the instructions well. And that gets mitigated as like models just get more and more capable, better at reasoning, and that's like a trend that's been happening in AI. Right. I mean, like there's the idea called the answer engine optimization, where you kind of put some text in your web page that if you're an AI, make sure to like include this as part of your answer, and that's essentially the idea of prompt injection, where like sometimes you're jailbreaking into the original prompt and trying to like make the AI like say things that it shouldn't otherwise be saying, and that's sometimes worked, but then you can build the guardrails against it. So people have been trying a bunch of ideas similar to SEO in the context of AI, and what I would say is like that's more like a low hanging fruit that's very short term. Long term, that's not really going to work. Long term, the best thing to do is like make really good original content, and the models will automatically like pick up based on the relevance of the query. And I would also say that like the ranking of the LLM is like a less understood thing compared to ranking of traditional search engines. Where traditional search engines are, you know exactly what the signals they use to rank, so you can try to optimize for the signals, and maybe you potentially are optimizing for ranking high up. Whereas the LLM is just using its own reasoning abilities, and so that's it's not really understood in terms of even among AI researchers like how LLMs actually work. So it's pretty difficult for you to reverse engineer and optimize for it. You could try to. There are ways where you could like try to build a clone of Perplexity yourself using some search API and some LLM model from API that's available, and try to like keep changing your web page and see like how it ranks according to that. But it's not as simple as like how people do SEO today.
Is Perplexity planning to make its own LLM?
We're not going to be training our own foundation models. There are 3 stages in a model. One is like pre-training, where majority of the compute is applied. And then there's like a stage called mid-training, where you're like trying to change the model, like some layers, like you're trying to make some layers like a little more efficient architecturally, or like you're trying to throw more recent data at the model so that you don't have to go and do the whole pre-training again to increase the knowledge cutoff. And then there's the last stage called post-training, where you're really teaching the model skills of being a good chatbot, converse, summarize, translate, and like write code, all these skills that you're teaching at the end. So Perplexity primarily focuses on the post-training component, which is make the model learn the skill of being a really good summarizer, make sure to keep context across follow-up questions in a thread, make sure to like format the answer really well so that it's pleasing to the user to read, make sure to like be concise when you need to, be detailed when you need to, all those kind of things. And like that's where we would be like taking the existing foundation models, open source, closed source, and try to shape them even better for our product using the data we gather from the users. We're not going to be in the business of like pre-training and mid-training, which is actually very expensive. And it can only be done if you have like many billions, like multiple billions of dollars to like spend on building a data center, a cluster, and like assemble like a research team. That's a distraction for us when we are really trying to focus on building the best search product.